Hello everyone, my name is Preethy Joseph and I am the Audit and Assurance Tutor working with Phoenix Financial Training. This video, you will be able to understand how do you need to approach the AA paper for your AA exam. Firstly, let me take you through in terms of what is the actual exam structure for AA. AA is slightly different compared to any other fundamental papers because if you see the AA paper, you've got only two sections of the paper. You've got section A of the paper as well as you have section B of the paper. Whereas in all the other fundamental levels, like if you see PM, tax, FR, FM, any other papers, you'll actually see three sections, section A, B, and C. What you see in section B and C of the other papers is what we have in section A and B. So you don't have the small MCQ questions in our paper. So starting with section A of the paper, which comprises of 30% of the paper, there are totally 3 scenarios given to you. Each of them are going to have 5 questions and each of those questions are going to be worth 2 marks each. If you're looking at the structure in terms of how the examiner tests the 5 questions, there would be certain elements of knowledge and there would be certain elements of questions that is purely based on the given scenario. So if you see the proportion of the 5 questions that is given to you, I would say around 2 questions would be pure knowledge dump questions, whereas the 3 questions would be scenario based questions. So where you have to read the scenario and then based on that you should be able to answer the requirements of the question. But 2 questions that is going to be knowledge based, that's purely coming from the knowledge that is coming from your international standards of auditing, your ISRs. So in that case, they will ask you, like, for example, what are the components of the audit risks? Or let's say, for example, what are the matters to be considered before accepting an engagement? So they will talk about any of this, which is pure knowledge, which you need to be made aware of. Okay, moving now to section B of your paper. When we're talking about section B of your paper, that is the main crest of our paper, which is because it is 70% of our papers. When we're talking about 70% of the paper, it is broken down into 3 questions. There is one 30-mark question and there are 2 20-mark questions. In the structure in terms of what is going to be tested for you in each of these questions are going to be as follows. So you have the first kind of a question where they can ask you on audit risks and auditor's response. Then they can ask you questions revolving around controls that talks about, it can be any of these 5 questions they can test you on. So it can either be on objectives of the system, like asking you, like for example, if you're talking about sales, you're making sure that the sales that you're generating are for the right customers, are for credit-worthy customers. Those are called as objectives. Then we're looking at strengths in terms of the controls that already exist in the given scenario, or else I can ask you for deficiencies. That means weaknesses, meaning controls that do not exist. And for each control, you need to give a recommendation. For each recommendations of a control, then you need to perform is a test of control. I can assure you for sure in the exam, the last 3 would definitely be there in terms of identifying a deficiency, explaining it, giving a recommendation, performing a test of control. But the other 2, it may be there, it may not be there. But at least make sure you're comfortable with it if it does come in the exam. Then for sure, substantive procedures would be there. Both will come for sure, knowledge as well as scenario based. Knowledge will be part of the 30-mark question that we're talking about, where they will just say, describe the substantive procedure on any account balance or class of transaction. Like, for example, they will say, describe the substantive procedures on receivables. So there's no scenario based on it. It's just you should know what are the substantive procedures that you need to perform, worth around 5 marks max. Then we're talking about scenario based. That is where it will be one of the 20-mark questions, where they will give you maybe 3 scenarios, and each of the scenarios you'll have to talk about what is the issue under consideration, and then based on the given facts, you'll have to design substantive procedures spontaneously on the day of the exam. Okay, then for sure, as part of that substantive procedures, they will definitely talk about the audit report impact if the issues remain unresolved. So from the 3 scenarios that you have, they'll just pick up one of them. They'll say the issue still remains, and now tell us what will be the impact on the audit report. So this is for sure in what we have just discussed now. audit risk controls, and your substantive along with audit report. This is definitely going to be your structure of your 3 questions in your section B of your paper. Along with that, the examiner can ask you on corporate governance weaknesses and recommendations. It may be there, it may not be there. It's not like every sitting. Like the topics that we just discussed about, those are like assured it is going to come for you in the exam. But when we talk about corporate governance weaknesses, recommendation, it may not be there. Same goes with ethical issues and safeguards. Maybe they may not be there. But doesn't mean that the examiner cannot test you on this topics in section A of the paper. Yeah, so if it doesn't test you in section B, for sure it'll be there in section A of the paper. So it'll be there somewhere, but I'm just focusing on section B of the paper. Knowledge will be there in the 30 marker as well in the 20 marker. There will be an element of, as per ISRs, what are the contents that you need to know. So they would be worth around anything between like 3 marks all the way to 6 marks, 8 marks. There will be elements of knowledge in your exam as well. Okay, now in terms of the approach, guys, how do I expect you to start your exam? Straight away, I would recommend you guys to go straight into section B of your paper and not section A of your paper, because you need the time in the exam to be able to type out your answers and analyze your answers. If you have time, definitely move on to section A. So how do you need to split the time? So section B is obviously 70% of the paper. So you can easily take 2 hours to do this particular part, whereas 1 hour you can allocate for section A of the paper. So when the examiner says or the invigilator says your time starts now, don't even look at your section A questions. Just go straight into question number 16, which is your section B. It starts from question number 16. From there, just start off, read the requirements, tuck, and then go and read the scenario and start working through it. Keep an eye always on the clock, making sure that you need to ensure you finish it within the given 2 hours. Once you finish the section B of your paper, then you can come back to section A and then start choosing your options in section A of your paper. Because even if you eat up a bit more time, let's say for example you've taken 2 hours and 15 minutes, let's say hypothetically you need a little more time, you still have 45 minutes to do section A. Maybe when you're doing the questions you run out of time, just let luck favor you, just click, choose whatever options if you think the time is running and move on. But if you start with section A and you spend a lot of time in section A trying to read the scenario, try to think of an answer, and by the time you come in section B of your paper, you may run out of time. At that time, you can't just type away to glory because, it's different. Whereas if it's section A, you can click an answer, an option, and maybe let's hope for the best that, your luck favors you at that time. But that's why I said you need to spend majority of your time in section B of your paper, where that's where you're going to pass or fail the exam. It is 70% of your paper and not from section A of your paper. Please keep in mind this approach is only applicable for AA paper and it is not applicable for any other papers because the structure is very different for all the other papers in the fundamental level. All good. So thank you all very much for watching this video and all the very, very best for your exam, guys. Take care.